So just before the video starts, I wanted to give a quick shout out to what is quite possibly the most apt sponsorship I've ever come across for Vivec. Oftentimes I'll decline, 99.9% of sponsorship deals I come across, because I just don't think Raid Shadow Legends is very appropriate for the sort of content on this channel. But I know a lot of you like to fall asleep to these report videos, and that's why I thought these COZYSNUG sleep earbuds from LYTMI really are a match made in heaven for this channel and its viewers. If you're anything like me, you might struggle falling to sleep on your back with conventional earbuds in. I'd always wondered whether there were any designs that facilitated side sleeping without waking up with a perforated eardrum. Not only do these earbuds work wonders for side sleepers, they boast high quality audio, are super lightweight and soft with various different sizes of ear wings to pick and choose from, on top of having 21 hours of charge when using the charging case. So, now you can all quickly and smoothly fall asleep listening to me recount the usual litany of mind-bending, reality-shattering experiences that we all know and love. If you're interested, please check out the link in the description, and don't forget to use the discount code VIVEC for 10% off your order. Anyway, we'll crack on with the video now, but be sure to let me know what you thought of the earbuds if you do end up snatching yourself a pair, and thank you to LYTMI for reaching out, I really appreciate it. Creation of language. A Salvia Divinorum 20x extract trip report by Poet SB. Posted to EARBUDS.org May 26, 2020. The Foundation. As a short drug-related history, I had, at this point in my life, been smoking marijuana regularly for 8 to 9 years, and had, of course, a typical 22-year-old's accumulated experience with alcohol. I had also used LSD and psilocybin mushrooms quite frequently throughout my teenage years, but had quit for the most part by the age of 17, after too many anxious trips and panic attacks. I'm a firm believer that intelligent, artistic, and mystically inclined people are far more likely to experience so-called bad trips at times, because their brains are more willing to explore and deconstruct the scariest stuff of reality and consciousness. To provide a little more background for this experience, I feel that I must say something about my emotional and social well-being in the late summer of 2004. I had just graduated with a near meaningless degree from a liberal arts college, and having found no desirous employment options available to me, moved back in with my mother and father. I'd also finished a seriously negative long-term relationship at the end of my college career, and had my heart broken by an old fling for the second time earlier that summer. In addition, I began working the night shift at a plastics factory, which was filled with down-and-out characters, most of them struggling Laotian refugees with little or no education or opportunity. It was a time of deep introspection, occasionally crippling depression, and the overwhelming feeling that some active questing was necessary to progress to a newer and better level. Having had some minor experiences with Salvia in college, I decided to order a sample from the internet. The previous experiences to which I refer had always been pleasant enough, but weakly effective and disappointingly fleeting. Drowsiness and comfort would set in, usually for a period of no longer than 5 minutes. It reminded me of smoking marijuana with some low-grade opium on top, only the experience was far shorter. Reflection and research had led me to hypothesize that I was not getting a proper concentration of salvinorin A in the dried, unaltered leaves we smoked in college. So in ordering the aforementioned sample from the internet, I was pleased to discover that the plant was available as augmented with more potent extracts of salvinorin A. I selected the 20x extract, the highest concentration available from this particular site, and after waiting a few more days, it arrived in the mail. The experience. It was late August or early September. I finished my shift at the factory one early morning at 8 AM, as had been the custom for the past 3.5 months. During my last break, I'd inadvertently locked my keys in my car, so I was sitting on the hood and waiting for my mother, whom I'd just called, to arrive with the spare key. She did, and casually mentioned that she was off to court and wouldn't be back home until after I'd woken up, late in the afternoon. Seeing as my mom generally worked from home, I knew that this was an unequalled opportunity to test the Salvia out. I thanked my mother and drove the short distance home, where I promptly opened the doors and windows to get a nice early morning breeze, break out my glass bubbler, fill the bowl with salvia, and sit on the carpeted floor of my parents' family room. My back was straight against the front of our couch, my bare feet straight out in front of me. Stepping back for a minute here, I must say that I'd been researching the effects of salvia as of late, and was well aware of the suggestion for a sober sitter, and was also, of course, mindful of my past psychedelic experiences tending towards anxiety and fright. I was certainly being naive. Due to my underwhelming flirtations with salvia in college, and my recollections that a bad trip on acid or mushrooms is generally lessened by remembering the reality of one's psychoactive ingestion, I was prepared to smoke the salvia with no sitter present. Big mistake. Though, not as bad as it could have been. I can't say this enough though. If you're going to use salvia, arrange for a sober sitter. So, I sat in this position in front of my parents' couch and lit the pipe. The familiar metallic, acrid taste of salvia smoke filled my lungs, and I struggled to hold it in for a few seconds. I looked outside my backyard door, and the trees were morphing and bubbling a bit while I began to feel pleasantly dizzy, not unlike a nitrous hit. It seemed familiar and consistent with my salvia experiences in college, and I thought, why does everyone make such a big deal out of this drug? I was totally overconfident in my ability to experience this drug solo in these few seconds. I'll just take one more hit then, and leave it at that, I thought. And so I did. As soon as I expelled the smoke from my lungs, the world melted, and I had the unbelievable realistic sensation that my ass and body were sinking through the floor, supported only by the oriental rug, which was also sinking under my own weight. Because I was pulling the rug in with my body weight this way, it had the visual effect of sinking slowly into darkness, with the lights and colours of the room shrinking into a smaller hole above my head. As this happened, the room lamp and a few other pieces of furniture anthropomorphized and reached out with their hands to me in a loving gesture, saying, telepathically, "Don't be afraid, we're here to help and guide you," or something to that effect. I was both aware enough and out of it enough to have this incorrect epiphany before I sunk in all the way. That's so nice of my friends to come here and watch me while I do this. It's so great that they're concerned. I really love them. That is the last semi-rational thing that crossed my mind for quite a few minutes. I don't know if I dropped the pipe or not. I wish I could tell you all about the peak experience, those 5 to 8 minutes immediately following the second hit. But the truth is that all that remains is a lingering somatic memory of intensely bright colours, unbelievably violent motion, and a feeling that the world was being snapped up like a prismatic suitcase, shutting itself up in parcel tiles, and that I was frantically trying to find the last corner to disappear before I was swallowed up by the oblivion. All of these visuals and movements were entirely obscuring my real vision. In other words, I believe I was moving around my parents' first floor with eyes open, but only perceiving hallucinatory visual stimuli. This was quite different from my numerous experiences with LSD and psilocybin. Even at high dosage, most of my hallucinations, they'd take place with either closed eyes or some surreal cartoonish exaggeration of the real visual field. With mushroom use specifically, I'd always perceived colourful geometric abstractions, but they were always superimposed as a grid over the real visual field. Not quite so with this salvia extract. After the first couple of minutes, I was in some colourful place where the creation of language occurs. I will try to describe this as best I can. The world was populated with wriggly, writhing organisms. These were bizarre, alphabetic runes, graphemes, pieces of sound, microscopic quarks of letters, all the component parts needed to make written and spoken language. They looked mystical, asemic, and occult-oriented, appearing at times like Hebrew, Aramaic, Enochian patterns. But they were also wet, undulating, and capable of morphing into different shapes. I think they were largely constructed by my mind to resemble the drawings of Rick Griffin. I've been reading up on the history of underground comics all summer. Spermy, pulsating, and paranoid. The organisms seemed gleeful, and even made some cutish, cartoony, squeaking noises. And it was this very glee that originally made me uneasy. Now this is where it gets really hard to explain. I had a sensation of a word. Fuck. I'm not sure if I said it out loud, or my mind merely constructed it internally. In any case, I was present in this land to see how this word was formed at its origin. I started by perceiving the whole word especially as a sound, but linked metaphorically to these images, than something like fuck, then fuck, then just a f sound, etc. I was going back in time and in scale to see how the sounds are born, so to speak. The movement was exponential in its velocity, so there was a whooshing effect to the whole scene, which was very reminiscent of my earlier perceptions of the parceling up of the world. The image that correlated to this ordeal microscopy was a visual awareness that all of these organisms were arrayed on the bottom of the shoe of God. As he stepped, a word was born, and as he raised his foot up from the ground, heel first, the next word began to be formed. The organisms acted like gluey bits on the bottom of the infinite shoe, so that they stretched between the heel and the ground imprint before snapping back up against the sole as they were pulled free. This is what produced certain sound forms for words. So time was moving backwards through the word fuck, until I was perceiving the exact structure and feeling of the gluey organisms being peeled and forming the f sound. At that moment, I was that f, and I felt myself being peeled from the earth, sending me into the infinity of the parceling up again. And then the scope became so minute that time and perception stopped. I was in the silence before the word fuck began, and after the last unknown word had been spoken, I could feel nothing but stasis, which was unbearably frightening. I had absolutely no idea that I had taken a drug at this point. I thought I had accidentally stumbled into some nightmarish hole in physical space which existed, but was not usually perceptible. I felt something like, oh shit, I've gotten stuck in this endless space between words, and I'm never gonna get back. I was suddenly aware of being in my parents' kitchen, so I walked back in the family room and sat back down in my original position, on the floor, back up against the couch. But now though, I was really getting anxious. So I went around the corner to the washroom to splash some cold water on my face. When I exited the bathroom and turned the corner again, I saw my body sitting in front of the couch as if I hadn't moved. This did not seem troublesome. I thought, I'm just having a simple out-of-body experience here, and if I can crawl back into my head, I'll be back in the driver's seat, so to speak, and reality will become reality again. But no matter how I tried to walk towards my body, climb on top of the sofa cushions and crawl back into my head, I just kept spiraling closer or closer to it, in Fibonacci terms. This is when I really started to panic. Somehow I spiraled out and away and ended up in the kitchen again. I remember trying to look at the picture on that day's newspaper to orient myself. I looked back in the family room and it seemed my body was gone, which was a relief. The sensations of ensuing panic were really overwhelming to me, but I couldn't remember what had happened to make reality seem this way. I would almost remember, but then it would fade, and I'd be left holding nothing. The unparceling of the world, infinite Fibonacci, all over again. I was increasingly feeling that everybody I knew, every person from my whole life, was in on this joke. That they had somehow tricked me into this perceptual black hole, and that by remembering what it was that had been done to me, it would cease. That, and they were all hiding behind objects close by, and would jump out with huge malevolent grins and say, "Surprise, we got you," once I'd figured it out. These feelings, combined with getting closer and closer to the true realization of the experience, gave me this unbearably creepy sense that these people were standing right behind me saying, yes, you've almost got it. What a frenzied bunch of terrifying ghouls. I was frustrated and more than a little paranoid now. I sat back down in my original position and suddenly remembered that I had taken a drug. I remember hearing the words come out of my body, "You smoked it." I'm pretty sure I said that out loud. What it was, at this point, I wasn't quite sure, but I could hold on to this point as a bit of the substance. I marked this in retrospect as beginning the descent back into reality. Still paranoid, I felt that at any moment, someone was going to burst through my front door and be very angry and/or malicious, malevolent with me. I kept looking out the front door and seeing a mysterious van, motionless in the residential street right outside my lawn. What the hell was it doing there? I felt confused and scared, but decided that I was probably freaking myself out for no reason. Still, I was pretty sure the van was really there, and I wasn't hallucinating it. Within milliseconds, I found myself suddenly in my upstairs bedroom, breathing furiously and sweating, throwing my bubbler pipe in its hiding place like something really bad had just happened. Had it? Well, I couldn't remember. Had my parents come home? I went running down the staircase as fast as possible, nearly falling and injuring myself severely in the process. I could see the van, still there, out the window. I now felt that it had been there for quite a few minutes. Jesus, I couldn't even remember the first few minutes of the experience. Had something terrible happened? Had I run out the house and gone amok in my parents' suburb? Racking my brain, I came down just a little bit more to remember this. The drug I took was Salvia. It was legal, and it would only last probably a few more minutes. I decided to ride it out and ignore the van outside, feeling it would probably go away and this whole thing would be over soon. I lay down on the couch and turned on the TV to orient myself. There was some weird movie on Comedy Central, and I remember Kiefer Sutherland being on screen with a woman, and I recognised Kiefer Sutherland as himself, and this made me feel like I was getting a better grip on reality. The two characters were talking about a TV show, I think, and I thought, wow, that's pretty funny and meta considering my state right now. And all of a sudden, Kiefer stops mid-line and freezes. Oh no, I think to myself. He then says he forgot what his line is, and the woman tries to come up with it and he says, "No, I don't think that's it." And then, no fucking kidding, he pulls the fucking script out of his back pocket and turns directly toward the viewer, asking for help. I freaked out hard, and I mean hard. To this day, I have no clue what this movie is or if a scene like this actually happens in it. But if you know, please post it somewhere to ease my mind. I frantically turned off the TV and stole a glance outside. That van was still there. My worked up brain had concocted a marvellously fucked up narrative at this point. While I was so out of it all I was seeing was colours. I must have ran out into the street outside and gotten hit by the car. Holy shit. Even if Salvia was legal, this spelled certain legal doom for me. My only avenue was to go outside and reason with the driver, hoping he or she would go away. I ran outside and across the lawn. As a side note, the lawn was spongy and vaguely moist and organic and fungal on my bare feet. It was simply the best lawn ever. In fact, I wrote a published poem about it later that month. I ran around to the driver's side of the car, which had been obscured from the angle of my previous glances. I came around, wild-eyed, shoeless, at something like 8:30 AM, and completely startled the middle-aged female driver and the middle-aged female jogger standing next to the window. They'd no doubt seen each other in the neighbourhood that morning and rolled down the window to have a nice chat. I frightened both of them enough that they let out a yelp. "What happened? What happened to me?" I demanded. "Who'd you hit?" "Well, no one," they replied, still shocked. I'm sorry," I said, and touched the jogger lightly on the shoulder, as if she were the one that needed consolation. I spun around on my heels, ran back across that lawn to ride out the last few minutes. Goodness, that lawn, how amazing it felt. And even though I should have been mortified by my behaviour in front of my suburban neighbours, I felt released. Reaching the door, I laid back down on the couch and called my then girlfriend at work to tell her what had happened. After hanging up, I was aware of having come down from the majority of the drug. I felt energised, comfortable, a little angry and anxious with myself perhaps, but drowsy and warm. I watched the trees outside the back door as they seemed to breathe and pulsate slowly with my own breath, and the breath of the walls in the room. Everything felt connected. I was glad to have been through it and come back to this place. The aftermath. Fewer than 2 weeks later, I left the factory job and got a job I enjoyed so much more. I made some new friends, got some money together, and moved out of my parents' house to go to graduate school a year later. Here I am, almost 4 years later, and life is pretty good. I definitely feel that, despite the horrors of the Salvia experience, it gave me a perceptual wisdom at a time in my life when it was desperately needed. final analysis. Salvia will lend itself to possibly helpful and enlightening reflections after the fact, but it is no picnic. Salvia challenged me on all possible levels, and I left reality as I know it. There was no safety net like there is with LSD, where I could comfortably tell myself that I was on a trip. Possibly the scariest part of this experience is that this all happened in under 30 minutes. If you notice at first, he says that he finished his factory job at 8 AM, and then by the time he ran out to the van to meet the jogger, he said that it was 8:30 AM. This really is a testament to the perceptual, annihilating experiences of Salvia and the experiences of time dilation that you can have on this substance. Compared to a lot of substances where you can experience time dilation and obliteration of perceptual sense, Salvia plays with it in quite a twisted manner. It really is the most alien of all the substances. I've said this many times. I mean, you can have alien experiences on a variety of psychoactive drugs, but Salvia really does completely challenge your sense of reality, and it really is reserved for the most veteran of psychonauts. And even then, there's no guarantee that any veteran psychonaut will actually gain any positive takeaways from this experience, but like the guy said in this report, sometimes people are born to do crazy shit. Sometimes people are naturally drawn towards stuff like Salvia and intense mystical experiences, whether it's through psychoactive substances or just mystical practices in general. On a genetic level, some of us are hardwired to pursue these, and whilst I would advocate for most people to steer clear of Salvia, I mean, let's just be honest, most people, like 99% of humans, are probably not geared up to experience states of consciousness as radical as this. It must also be said that some people are just, born to do it. Some people are just meant to explore consciousness in all of its most radical, extreme ways. But it's important to recognize your own limits, and sometimes your ego, your lower self, can trick its higher self into thinking that it's ready to experience these things. You might have all these crazy psychedelic experiences up your belt and experience life in radical, extreme ways outside of the psychedelic experience, and then the ego can solidify around these experiences and create a false sense of security when it comes to dabbling in the more extreme stuff like Salvia. And this is oftentimes when your trip can turn into something nightmarish and quite destructive. But then, again, it must also be said that if you do end up falling down the rabbit hole of psychedelic hubris that leads you to explore something like Salvia and you have a nightmarish experience, and it does derail your life for quite a bit, you also have to have the awareness that it doesn't have to be like that forever, and that you can integrate the experience and actually move on and grow from it, rise from the ashes per se. So to anyone who's been through that, I would definitely appreciate your insights, because I read a lot of comments. There's so many fascinating people who comment on my YouTube videos that have been through experiences like Poet SB and many of the other crazy reality-shattering Salvia experiences, and experiences with any sort of substance, but especially the really alien, out-there ones like Salvia. And there's a little light in the dark that highlights that, yes, of course, it can really destroy your life and give you dissociation, derealization, and all of these other nasty psychological effects. But if you have enough drive, enough willpower, awareness, and motivation to really grow as a being, a spiritual being, a human being, whatever you want to call it, there is the potential for you to transmute the negativity of the experience and the after effects into something positive down the line. And that's why I wish people like Poet SB and anyone else who's experienced something as nightmarishly extreme as, a trip report in the vein of this, that they are doing the best in their own life now and manage to look back on the experience and see it as, while something you wouldn't possibly wish on your worst enemy, that hopefully you in your own personal experience of life manage to look back on this radical experience of consciousness and circumnavigate all of the challenges and obstacles that presented to yourself, and then carve out a better, more constructive, more unified sense of yourself and reality and consciousness in the big picture. So yeah, wishing anybody who's gone through something as nightmarish as a crazy Salvia experience the best in working through it and making a better life for themselves and for others, and continuing to strive towards greater levels of unity and interconnectedness with your own self and others, and just creating a better world. Sometimes these people are thrown into the pits of hell to then come back, tell us what it's like, so that we understand more about ourselves, consciousness, and the magnitude of this thing we call reality, so that we learn, grow, and embrace love in all its totality. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you on the other side.